Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of data detectives to investigate a massive cultural funding system. We're going to explore exactly how complex network analysis and mathematical modeling can expose the hidden topology of wealth concentration, and more importantly, how we can actually fix it. Let's dive right into the raw numbers, because they are staggering. Over 106,000 transactions. That represents more than $1 billion poured into Brazil's cultural sector between 2010 and 2014, all through a tax incentive mechanism known as the Rouanet Law. We're talking about over 12,000 approved projects and nearly 40,000 different sponsors. It is a massive, mathematically complex web of money. Now, why does tracking all this money actually matter? Well, think about Edgar Schein's hierarchical framework of culture. You've got observable artifacts, things like art, technology, and public events, sitting right at the very top. But funding these surface-level creations actively shapes the latent, invisible values and basic assumptions at the very base of the society. By deciding what gets funded, sponsors are inadvertently engineering a society's collective identity. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll unpack the cultural funding puzzle, look at the anatomy of the Rouanet Law, build out a bipartite network, visualize this cultural space, and finally, look at fixing structural inequality.
Part 1. The Cultural Funding Puzzle.
As Book famously pointed out, evaluating government policies is absolutely vital for maintaining public trust. When you've got literally billions of public tax dollars being redirected into culture via private incentives, rigorous, impartial evaluation is crucial. I mean, if a decentralized system allows private sponsors to just choose where public money goes, we need to mathematically verify something. Is this system actually preserving cultural diversity, or is it just amplifying socioeconomic inequality? Moving on to Part 2, Anatomy of the Rouanet Law. So how does this actually work? It boils down to a three-stage bureaucratic life cycle. Stage A, creators secure government approval for their projects. Stage B, they hunt for private capital. They're looking for companies or individuals who will provide funds in exchange for tax deductions. And finally, Stage C involves strict accountability reporting. So essentially, the state approves the concept, but the free market totally dictates what gets built. But here's where we hit a massive paradox in the geographic data. You'd probably expect a fair distribution of funds across diverse states, right? Instead, the data reveals stark spatial disparities. The already wealthy Southeast completely dominates the landscape. Meanwhile, states like Maranhão have significantly lower approval rates. And get this, some regions are 40% less likely to secure private capital even after they get government clearance. So clearly, government approval does not equal market success. Which brings us to Part 3, building the bipartite network. To really crack this case, researchers brought in some heavy analytical artillery, graph theory, specifically bipartite networks. A bipartite network connects two disjoint sets of nodes. In this context, one set of vertices represents the sponsors, and the other represents the distinct cultural segments they fund, things like popular music or photography. The edges between them essentially map out the underlying architecture of private capital.
Next, researchers mathematically projected this bipartite data into a unipartite segment-to-segment network. Doing this isolates true co-sponsorship. Basically, by folding the sponsor nodes, we can see exactly which cultural segments are consistently funded together by the exact same actors. For example, if a corporation funds both theater and film, a mathematical edge connects those two cultural nodes. Now, to make absolutely sure these edges aren't just statistical noise, researchers applied a strict phi correlation. This tests if the shared sponsorship between segments exceeds the null hypothesis, which would just be pure random chance. Then they layered on a Benjamini-Hochberg false discovery rate filter. This conservatively slices away the noise, revealing the true statistically significant structural backbone of cultural co-sponsorship. It's brilliant.
Part 4. Visualizing the cultural space. When we visualize these statistical correlations, distinct cultural signatures emerge for every single state, and it proves there are drastically different funding behaviors between corporate and individual sponsors. The clusters of who funds what completely ignore geographical proximity. In fact, state cultural profiles splinter massively when we separate institutional capital from private citizen money. The sheer imbalance here is staggering. Get this, corporations make up just 18% of the sponsors, yet they control a massive 98% of the funds. 98%!
and they are heavily clustered in the wealthy southeast. A corporation in São Paulo might sponsor a highly diverse portfolio of 89 distinct cultural segments, but up in Amapá, individual sponsorships might only cover 2. This creates a self-reinforcing network topology. Wealthy regions build dense, diverse cultural ecosystems, while underserved areas remain structurally starved.
Finally, Part 5, Fixing Structural Inequality.
So, instead of just blindly throwing money at the problem, this network framework gives policymakers surgical precision. First, strategic targeting. States can identify adjacent cultural nodes, sectors highly connected to what they already do well, and strategically expand there. Second, redistributing incentives. We can offer targeted tax breaks to corporations specifically for funding unconnected regional nodes. And finally, monitoring. Using dynamic network graphs to measure the true topological richness of the cultural ecosystem over time, rather than just tracking total dollars spent. This whole analysis leaves us with a pretty profound takeaway. We've seen exactly how rigorous network analysis, using bipartite projections and phi correlations, can expose the hidden architecture of national funding. If mathematical modeling can uncover these invisible biases, imagine how else data science could reshape and democratize the cultural systems around you. To truly appreciate the depth of this data detective work, I highly encourage you to read the original research paper. It really is a masterclass in applying complex systems to real-world societal issues. Look up the DOI 10.1007/S4-1109-206-00799Y and explore how advanced network analysis is uncovering the hidden truths in our society. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the data around you.